Okay, in this video we're gonna try and use all the kind of modeling techniques that we've been learning so far, and we're gonna try and create this door frame for the Betsy Ross house. Another thing that we're gonna have to do is maybe create a little bit of geometry on the actual wall so we can kind of push it in the way it's in our reference, because since the beginning this has been kind of placed in front of the walls, and that's not correct. So so we're gonna have to change the geometry of the object that's kind of been the walls of our house as well, and that's gonna be a major change because there's a lot of things that might or might not work when we're kind of changing geometry like this. So at this point, make sure you save your current progress by just going to File and doing Save, and do a Save As, and save as, you know, the next number in your number file, to make sure that you can go back to the original or what you had there before, just in case that you make a mistake. So with that in mind, just go in here and make a couple cuts here. I'm going to go ahead and turn on my X-ray here. Have to kind of manipulate some of this so it's in the right place. Okay. And alright, so I'm going to select the body of my house, and I'm going to go in here and create a couple cuts, which again is going to be the whole of the door here. So I'm going to use my Insert Edge Loop tool, and again I'm going to look at the settings because I don't know, not this one, Insert Edge Loop tool, and right now it's doesn't have the right settings, so I have to make sure that it's at relative distance from edge, so I can kind of intuitively just go in here and draw the edges where I want to. Okay. So always make sure to check the settings of your tool before you use it, or if your tool is not doing what it's supposed to do, it's because their settings you know, are not correct. So now that I went in here and drew in a couple of lines, and again I'm going to show you exactly what I'm doing here. Let's just switch off the shading. Another thing that you're going to see me doing a lot is maybe isolating my geometry so I can kind of focus on it rather than having to see the whole project. So to do that, let's say we want to select just the body of the house. Go into Show, Isolate Select, and View Selected, and that's going to isolate, you know, the one thing that you have selected. Since this is something that I'm going to be using a lot, I'm actually going to detach that tab and just kind of keep it here for myself. But now that I have the whole of the entrance here, what I'm going to do is select Face, select that face, and then delete it. Alright, so it's like now we have an entrance to the house, and I'm going to check off View Selected so I can go back to this. So now I can take that initial sorry, door frame that we created and kind of push it in just the way it is on our reference. And again, the idea for that we've been kind of establishing since the beginning is that not everything needs to be one piece, and it's a lot easier sometimes if you just kind of break it down into separate pieces to kind of make it easier for you to work with. Okay, so the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to create a couple cuts on this door frame so I can kind of bring in my geometry in. So by using my Insert Edge Loop tool, I'm going to go into the front view, okay, and I'm going to again create cuts. Alright, actually before I do this, I have a feeling that this is something that I'd rather work only half of it and then kind of mirror it. So I'm actually going to kind of cut it in half, And again, to do that and to do it in a very symmetrical way, I'm going to go to the Insert Edge Loop tool, go to the settings, and mine are popping up right here. Okay. And instead of relative distance from the edge, I'm going to change this to multiple edge loops, and I'm going to put it on one. And by doing that and clicking here, anywhere here on these parallel lines is going to create a cut right down the middle. Okay. Once I've done with that, I'm just going to change it back to relative distance from the edge and close it. Then I'm going to select the faces that I don't need and get rid of them. So by just marquee select that half of the object, click on delete. Alright. And alright, so now we have part of the door frame here. And next thing that I'm going to do is do a couple more edge loops, so I can kind of create the places where the door's going to fit in, and also this kind of 4 panel window here. So I'm going to make the cut for that to fit in. Alright. And again, just to kind of show you what I'm trying to do here, I'm going to isolate this. Okay, and something's missing. I'm missing one cut. So I have one that's going to be this space, and I need one for the door. So let me just use one more edge loop tool here and make the cut right here. Okay, so again, I'm going to isolate this, and I'm going to select these faces, get rid of them. Okay. Alright, and I also have one face here at the bottom that I might want to get rid of. Okay, so it's a couple of things that we need to do to this door frame. And we kind of have to think about what would be the best approach to do this, because we have a kind of like a somewhat of a detailed kind of frame here, and we also have the door frame itself, and then some kind of sort of indentations here. So we got to think about what would be the best way of kind of going about creating those details. And let's just go back to this, and if I, now that I have the hole for the door and that 4 window frame there, I can select my door and just kind of push it into where it's supposed to go, here. And perhaps this, and again, the pivot for this object is kind of off. It's not at the center of it, because remember we used a duplicate of this one. And the thing with the duplicates sometimes, well, not the duplicates, but the way that we edit it, because remember we went to the sub-object mode if we move the vertices, is that doesn't really affect the location of the pivot, just the location of the components of the object. So if you want your pivot to be centered on the actual object, you can do it by using the shortcut D to just kind of move the pivot where you want it to be, or you can go to modify and center the pivot. Okay. So alright, so again, we're trying to figure out what we're going to do with this door frame here. One of the things that comes to mind is that sometimes it's easier to kind of start from a flat object and then just kind of give it dimension, and I think that's the technique that I'm going to be using here. So I'm going to isolate this object, and I want to get rid of the depth. Alright, and the reason for that, again, is because I'm going to go in here and I'm probably going to be doing a bunch of extrusions in, and some of that work is going to probably collapse with what's going here behind it. So rather than using an object that has depth, I'm just going to start with a flat sheet and then kind of go from there. So let's go to the top viewport right here. Alright, and if you ever if you change your viewport and it's always kind of off camera or you don't know where it is, just click on F, the shortcut F for frame, and it's going to bring what you have selected right to the front of your camera. So I'm going to select the geometry that gives it depth, and then go back to my perspective or front, and now we just have a flat face. Okay, so let's just go back to this. Alright, and then I can just kind of push this back in for now. Alright, so again, trying to figure out what would be the best approach for this. So we have this little bit of an edge here, then we have this kind of flat kind of area that's supposed to be the frame, and then you have a little bit more indentation details. And again, it's pretty intricate. I'm probably going to be taking a little bit of creative license with this. So one of the things that I'm going to do is to kind of maybe separate maybe this edge right here from the rest of the door. Okay, and to do that, alright, and I'm going to go back to my X-ray here. So I want to have an idea of how thick that edge is. To do that, I'm going to go ahead and draw in the geometry for that specific detail right there and right here. Okay, and I'm going to detach that geometry. It's gonna make it easier for me to be able to extrude it in and do details to this area without having to affect the rest of the door if I do it like this. So if you have a piece of geometry right here and you want to separate it, a specific piece of it off of it, select what you want to have off, like this inside frame of it, and then I'm gonna go into mesh, which I have right here, and I'm gonna click on extract. Alright, now I think I just made a mistake, and again, notice that when I extracted, it kind of separated each one of the faces separately, and one of the reasons for that is because we didn't keep our faces together checked on. So you gotta be very careful about that. So let me just go back to this point where it's still part of it, check on my keep faces together, and then extract it. So by doing that, it's now one piece. Okay, so again, we're going to try and address this in separate pieces just to kind of make it easier for us. And okay, and perhaps I'm going to take well, you know what, let's just start with this first. So it's a couple things that we can do here, but again, just to kind of keep it easy for us, I'm just going to do like a 3-step type of kind of decor here. Okay, but one of the things that's going to happen, for instance, and again, we gotta kind of, again, always trying to figure out the best solution for this, is to figure out how we're going to be doing the detail. Now, first instinct would be to actually maybe create a couple more cuts here so we can kind of extrude them in. But there's it's a little bit of a consequence to that. So, and again, let me just kind of demonstrate. I'm going to insert the edge loop tool here. And again, I'm not going to kind of keep this as is. But if I were to take this face right here, and again, I'm going to select all these faces and kind of extrude them back in, is that as soon as I push them in, yes, I am going to have an extrusion, but when you have open faces like this, there's going to be an edge remaining there. So again, let me just kind of demonstrate. So I'm going to go into extrude, okay, and push it in. Okay, and again, notice that it didn't take those edges with it and push them down. It actually left an edge there, and you know, this could be problematic if you have to kind of go in there and kind of get rid of them yourself. So you know, that this is one way of kind of going about it, but perhaps not the best approach. So I'm going to go ahead and undo that. The next approach that I'm going to take is to actually I'm going to be extruding edges. And again, this is going to be a little bit different from what we've been doing, but let's just see if it works out. Now, one of the things that I want to do, since this is a separate edge, is to kind of get rid of some of the geometry that I'm not going to need. Okay. Now we created a cut here, and you know, I can kind of undo that. All right. But we also have a couple edges here, and again, I'm going to isolate this. I'm going to have a couple edges that have no purpose with this geometry. And again, that's one of the nice things of trying to kind of keep things separate, is that, you know, this geometry doesn't have to kind of coincide with what's going on the other one, because I don't have to attach them or anything. So I'm going to select these edges, these extra edges that I have, and I'm going to get rid of them. And I could just select them and click on delete, but one of the problems with that is that it leaves the edges, I mean the vertices behind. So to properly get rid of these, you need to select them and go into Edit Mesh, delete Edge Vertex. Alright, and that's going to get rid of not only the edges but also the extra vertices. Alright, so back to how I'm going to be dealing with this border here. I am going to go in here and I'm going to take this edge, okay, and I'm just going to select these two, and I'm going to move it up like this. I'm going to take this one as well and move it in. And what I'm going to do, rather than extruding the faces, I'm going to actually extrude the edges. Okay. So far we've only been extruding faces, but you can actually extrude the edges by themselves as well. And again, that's one of the reasons we cut it in half, and we kind of dealing with this you know, separately, so we can kind of see what the best solution for this. So I'm going to click on extrude. Okay, and again, notice that I'm only extruding the edges and nothing else. Alright, so I'm going to extrude that. Then I'm going to do another extrude to kind of push it out. Okay, and again, we gotta, some of this it might not be extruding straight the way we want to. So gotta make sure that we kind of go in here and move this edge where it needs to go, which is somewhere around there. Okay. And again, so one of the ways that you can go about kind of fixing these kind of discrepancies is that you're going to see a little bit of crookedness on our line here, and all I'm doing is kind of moving it to the side until I see a straight line, and that's how you know it's correct. So something along the lines of this would work pretty well. Okay. So now we need to extrude it one more time in, and then leave one more time out, and I'm just gonna leave it at that. Let's just again select these two edges. We're gonna extrude the edges in, and then one more time for out. Again, I probably should be doing this on an orthographic viewport. Okay, and again, some of these vertices kind of went in a kind of weird direction here, so I just gonna need to make sure they are where they're supposed to go. Same with this one here at the bottom. Okay, and I'm just going to do one more extrusion, just inwards, and just leave it at that. So we have the edge selected, click on extrude. Alright, so that's going to give a little bit of depth to our frame right there. Okay, so then the next thing that's going to follow here, it's the frame of the door, okay, which can go right here. Okay, so now we're on this kind of flat area of it, and then we need to kind of create a little bit of kind of detail for these edges as well. So let's just kind of use the same technique and just extrude the edges rather than the faces. And again, I'm probably gonna have to give this a little bit more room because the door is at the size that it needs to be, and so is this space. So I'm just gonna move this up a bit. Just move it out. Same here. And again, just taking a little bit of creative license, not necessarily doing what's there, but maybe something that looks kind of like it. So again, rather than extruding faces, we're extruding edges. And we're gonna do one, push it back. And then G one more time. Just do it off the local Z-axis. And again, some of this is not kind of extruding the way it's supposed to. So we just kind of need to go in there and adjust it before we do the next extrusion. Let's go to the front. Alright, and again, the way you adjust it is you're gonna see some crookedness in our line, in our line here. So all you gotta do is move it up until you kind of see a straight line, and that should be good enough right there. Same with this one. You can even kind of take this and adjust it a little bit further back, because we are gonna need to do one more extrusion there. Okay. Same here. And right here on the side. Okay, so one more extrusion there. So select the edges, which should be already selected. Do one more extrude, push it back, and then back in one more time, and then kind of in again, so we can kind of give the door frame a little bit of depth. Okay, so one more time this, and again, this is gonna kind of mess some of this stuff up, but it's fine. Again, we have a guide to where they're supposed to go because it's supposed to match this frame right here and also the door. So now that that's in the right location, we can just kind of move it to where it's supposed to go, which is here. then there, here, and then the last one here at the bottom. Okay. So again, one last extrude, and this one's just to kind of give a depth right here. And one more extrude. Okay, almost done with this. Alright, so now when we look at this area, there's going to be something kind of covering the holes there. Alright, so then the last thing that I need to do to these models is actually kind of mirror them over, both the frame and the door frame here. And then the last thing we're going to address is this kind of 4-panel window, and then we'll kind of conclude this lesson. So let's just see if we can finish this real quick. So let's go back into a front viewport. Again, if we're going to mirror something over, we've got to I usually like to make sure that the pivot is right at the center, so it just kind of makes it easier for me. Now centering the pivot through modify here doesn't work. Or at least not the way you like, because rather than putting the pivot right in the center of where the object is going to be, it's based on the object that there already is. So it's better if we just use the shortcut D and perhaps use some snapping tool like the snap to vertice snap tool right here, and then just kind of snap it to the closest kind of vertice of our frame. So right now it's right at the center. So I'm going to turn off the snap. And then I'm going to use the mirror geometry tool. Okay, and now we have our frame. Okay, that worked pretty great. Now we're going to do the same thing with the outside frame here. I'm just going to do the same thing. Hold D, turn on our vertice snap, and then just kind of snap it to the closest vertice here. And then turn off our snap, and then just mirror the geometry over. Okay. And then the last thing we want to do is kind of work on this 4-panel window thing. And again, just in case whatever I do to this doesn't work, I want to go ahead and click on Save. Okay, and that's gonna, again, if I messed up on this object, then I can just kind of go back and start the file from the last time I saved, rather than having to start over. So it's just kind of something you gotta get used to. To do this one, we're going to start by, we're going to use the insert edge loop tool, and we're going to divide this thing into 4 parts. So we're going to switch from relative distance from edge to multiple edge loops. If we want 4 parts, we need to divide it into 3 equal parts. So then I'm going to click anywhere in my object here, and it's going to divide it into 4 parts. Okay. Now, the next thing I'm going to do, let's see, it's kind of do an extrusion of here on the inside, so so we can start creating these window holes. Okay, and we probably want to have the X-ray on so we can kind of simulate what's happening in the front viewport. Okay. Another thing that I want to do is probably just kind of work on half of this one and not the whole thing. So again, just gonna cut this like this. Let's see. Okay, I know what I'm gonna do. Alright, so I want to select, let's get rid of the faces of the back of this object. Okay. That way we only have the front and the edges here. Then the next thing I'm going to do is go to the front viewport, select each face, and I'm going to do extrusions to kind of form these windows here. But again, remember that we need to keep these faces not together for this to work. So I'm going to click on extrude and just use the scale tools here to just kind of make it go to where I want to go. And I can always just go into the sub object mode and can just kind of place them where I need them to go. Okay. So that should work just fine. And again, just so you guys get an idea of what's happening here. Okay, so then the next thing I like to do is start using the extrusion tool to do a little bit of detail here. So we're just gonna extrude twice on this just to make a little bit of a step, and then that should be good. So I'm going to be using the extrude tool here, going down once, and that didn't work. A little bit. Okay, then we're going to be using the extrude one more time, so G, and then scale. Okay, and then extrude one more time, so press G, and then down once. Okay, and then I'm going to get rid of these faces. Oh, actually, no, I'm going to detach them, actually, because again, just thinking ahead, I'm probably going to be able to use at least one of them, so I can set it up to be the windows of this object. So I'm going to get rid of this one, and I'm going to select this one, and I'm going to use the extract. Okay, so now this face right here that was part of this is now just a separate piece. Okay, so the next thing I want to do, I'm basically let's see where the pivot of this thing is. It's all the way up here. Again, one of the reasons for that was because when we originally modified this was probably a copy of the door. So the thing about modifying things based on the modifying only the sub-object mode of it is that the pivot is really not affected by it. So we can go to modify and center the pivot, but again, it's just going to kind of center on the object and not necessarily where we need it to be, so we can mirror it. So I'm going to go to the front viewport. I'm going to hold D so I can manipulate the pivot, and then I'm going to select the snap to vertices, so we can kind of snap it somewhere over here, and you know, that's fine. Turn off the snapping, go to mirror geometry. Alright, so that's complete. And the last thing that I'm going to do is select this piece of geometry that's left over from the original model, and I'm going to select the edges, and I'm just going to extend them out. And so later on I'm going to be able to give it some sort of maybe window texture or something like that. Alright, so again, this was kind of pretty complicated, but we were able to kind of make the whole door, the door frame, the frame of the door, the detail above the door using the techniques shown in the previous videos. And again, you can kind of use these kind of similar techniques for something like this. I'm probably going to go ahead and do these kind of on my own, and then when we come back, I'm probably going to try and talk about a different type of models that you can use to create maybe more organic objects like this, and it's called NURBS. But for now, this concludes just basics on modeling techniques. And again, we covered we used a lot of the same modeling techniques that we've been using throughout. There's a lot of extrusion, a lot of inserting your own edge loop tools, changing the settings. We learned how to extract geometry. Okay, we were able to mirror geometry to be able to just kind of concentrate on one side and then just kind of mirror over. And again, those are a lot of principles that you can kind of apply to most of the things that we're going to have to create for this specific model. Alright, so this concludes this video.